Hi, welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk about anxiety. I had a call last week, and strangely enough, the individual lived in Fort Myers, which is about 20 minutes from Cape Coral, Florida, where I live. So it's just over the bridge, just across the Caloosahatchee River. We had a long talk, and he's in a hard place. He's suffering from multiple symptoms, everything from acid reflux, a lot of muscle pain, can't get to sleep, rapid heartbeat, panic attacks, trouble catching his breath. He literally feels like he's dying. And that's how this condition feels. It feels like you're dying. He had been to several other doctors and has spent a lot of money. And I'm not here to say that that was the right choice or the wrong choice, because I don't know the details, but he's still suffering. He's still suffering from a lot of symptoms, and he's frustrated. I think that an important thing to think about is the idea of treating systems and not symptoms. And this is how I've always conducted my practice. So you want to look at the system and not just symptoms. Here's an individual with a lot of symptoms, and he's gone to, we can assume these other doctors are very intelligent and they mean well. So he goes to them and he presents himself with all these different symptoms, and they begin to assign treatment for each symptom. So this is something you would do for acid reflux. This is for sleeplessness. This is going to be for your pain. This is going to be for your panic attacks. And you can see how very quickly the treatment protocols can become so elevated that they just become almost impossible to get your head around. So I've seen quite a bit of this in all the years of practice. I've suffered from it myself, to be honest with you. And what we need to do is ask ourselves, what is the system here that is failing? And the reason I bring that up is because the human body is a fantastic healer. It has the ability to heal just about any condition, and I really believe that. If you can eliminate the challenges, the things that are preventing the body from doing what it does best, which is healing. So the joke, I guess it's not really a joke, but the saying in holistic medicine is, your body can heal any condition if you can just stay alive long enough. And it's a bit dark, but there is some truth to that. So in the case of this individual, the system is the nervous system. In the case of anxiety, we see a lack of integration of the nervous system. Remember, the nervous system controls all of these other systems. And if the nervous system is not integrated properly, if it's not doing its job, we start to see things break down, and then we get all these symptoms. The difference between integration and disintegration of the nervous system, that is my opinion as to the area that we need to focus. Certainly in this case, when we're dealing with basically a diagnosis of anxiety. Anxiety is the great trickster, right? It's the trickster because it almost seems like a blanket diagnosis because it involves so many symptoms, right? You could literally say that almost anything is anxiety. But here's the secret. Everything is anxiety. That's the key. So when somebody is having multiple conditions, multiple symptoms, lots of different symptoms, the first thing I think about is, this person's nervous system must not be integrating properly. Because if it was integrating, I know that the nervous system does such a good job, they wouldn't have all these symptoms, right? They would just have a couple of symptoms. But when somebody has multiple symptoms, it's this disintegration that that's where I start the program. That's where I start the treatment. That's where I start the focus. And so the first place that we want to look in a case of anxiety is the the gut. The gut and the brain are connected. Most people think that the way they feel and the way that their body operates has to do with neurotransmitters, things like dopamine and serotonin. These neurochemicals are released in the brain. This is traditionally what people thought, and that is responsible for how we feel. So if we're not feeling good, if we're feeling anxious, then the traditional medical approach would be that we need to do something to increase those neurotransmitters in the brain. But what we know now is that most of those neurotransmitters are not made in the brain. They're made in the gut. They're made specifically in the colon by bacteria as a byproduct. And especially today, there's so much gut dysregulation and so many problems with the natural occurring flora in our colon that a lot of anxiety conditions start in the gut. So the first place that I look, and the first place I look as far as treatment, right, is in the gut. And I've made lots of videos on this, and you can really go down a rabbit hole with dealing with the gut. I mean, you've heard of things like leaky gut, bacteria, parasites, viruses. I mean, tests upon tests to determine proper balance of gut flora. But that is just complicating something that does not need to be complicated, in my opinion. Now, obviously, there are conditions that are advanced that you need to look at those things. But for the average person, the solution to balancing gut flora lies with a wonderful supplement called human milk oleosaccharides. I've made videos on this. HMOs. Standard Process sells a product, a supplement called GI Stability. 2 of those wafers that you just chew and swallow, or you can just swallow them without chewing them, but they don't taste bad. 2 of those wafers a day supplies enough human milk oleosaccharides so that in 4 to 6 weeks, they will feed the good bacteria in your colon, and the good bacteria, the bacteria that's going to produce all these wonderful chemicals, these neurotransmitters that we need to feel good, they are going to begin to multiply. And slowly they're going to overpopulate, meaning they are going to become more, and the bad bacteria is going to become less, because everybody's fighting, right, for the same landscape, for the same property. And so just by taking this product, GI Stability, these human milk oleosaccharides, we can just take 2 of those a day. In advanced cases, I'll have people take 3 a day. We can just take those and let that go to work. So we don't have to worry about it anymore. We just take that, let that do its thing with the gut, let the gut rebuild naturally over time. And again, 4 to 6 weeks, we usually see some great improvements. I have run colon samples of fecal matter, stool samples from the colon, and I've ran bacteria profiles on them before and after taking GI Stability, and it's remarkable. And I made a video on this you can watch. It's remarkable to see the increase of that good bacteria and the decrease of things like E. coli, just from giving the good bacteria the food that it likes. And human milk oleosaccharides are found in breast milk. They are the primal food that we as humans use to feed, children when they're first born. They are the primal food that helps establish the gut flora. So it's an amazing product. So we start with that. The next thing is, that's all fine and dandy, right? We're working on the gut. We're working on getting the proper population of gut flora so that we can make the chemicals that's going to help us with the anxiety. That's a great plan, but it takes time. In the meantime, we're suffering. What do? I cannot state enough the value of Valerian complex. I really can't. In fact, I have some right here. This is my own bottle of Valerian complex. This product has literally saved me from so much suffering. I take it myself as needed. When I was going through a real hard time with anxiety, this was my key, along with the GI Stability. And the Valerian complex is unique. It has in it valerian root, it has passion flower, and it has something called Ziziphus, otherwise known as jujube seed. These 3 products together work to balance the nervous system. And this is the key. They're going to balance the nervous system. Your nervous system has the sympathetic and the parasympathetic elements. Sympathetic is always looked upon as being the gas pedal. Parasympathetic is more like the brake. Parasympathetic is useful for resting, digesting, relaxing. Sympathetic is useful for doing the things that we need to do, for getting up and getting on with things, right? And when they're balanced, everything is good. But in cases where we have anxiety, what tends to happen is the sympathetic nervous system seems to dominate. It seems to take over. And that is probably not so much because we're getting more sympathetic, but probably because we're not getting enough parasympathetic. Either way, Valerian Complex has the ability to balance that system out. It will calm down the system, it will relax the body, and it will not make you dopey or drowsy. You're not going to take this and next thing pass out or something like that. It's not a sedation. It's a calming agent. And that was what really made the difference for me and will probably make the difference for you. You can take a lot of this. It's not addictive. You can take, for example, 3 times a day. You can take 4 a day. You can take 2 at once if you need it. You take this supplement and this plant medicine as a way to, first of all, help you with the immediate symptoms of anxiety. So if you're having a panic episode that you feel is coming on, take 1 or 2 of these tablets. But more importantly, over time, with regular intake of Valerian Complex, you are going to train your nervous system. You're going to train the nervous system in what to do when you start to get this anxiety. It's going to remember how it feels when it was taking the Valerian Complex, and eventually it will just invoke that same sensation, eventually without taking the plant medicine. So it's a wonderful product, and for anyone suffering from anxiety, I can't recommend it enough. Make sure you get some Valerian Complex. Keep it on hand. I used to, when I was really having a hard time, I used to carry a couple of these tablets in my pocket. And you have to be careful with that because the only negative about Valerian Complex is it smells like dirty socks. Sometimes I wouldn't use the tablets. I just have them there sort of as a safety net. And they'd stay in my pocket. And then I'd come home at the end of the day because I was working in my clinic. I'd hang up my pants, my work pants, and put on like sweatpants or something. And my wife used to say to me, "Oh my God, right? What is in your closet?" She was going through all my socks trying to find the dirty socks, but it was actually the smell of the Valerian Complex that was in my pocket. So do be aware of that and be careful with that. Also, if you're suffering from anxiety, you have to find ways to induce controlled stress on your body. And that makes no sense, right? Because you're already under so much stress. But you have to establish controlled stress so you can, again, train and strengthen the nervous system. You want to get that integration and avoid that disintegration of the nervous system. There's lots of ways to do this. But to be honest with you, I have found the best way is simply walking. So if you're suffering from anxiety, learn to walk. Put on some headphones. Listen to something you like to listen to. Don't get out in the neighborhood and walk. Try to walk 1 mile in 20 minutes. That's a good pace. That should be your goal. Do this several times a day if you want. Don't go out and go for a walk and have your phone and swiping and looking at your phone while you're walking. Stop that. Put on headphones if you want. Listen to relaxing music. Breathe. Walk, look around at the neighborhood, look around at your sights, look at the environment. And that walking will raise your heart rate naturally, and it will train your nervous system for integration. There's nothing better than just going out for a walk. And so begin walking immediately. Another thing is protein intake. Make sure that you're getting protein. You have to have protein to make a lot of these neurotransmitters as well. And so if you're lacking in protein, you may have a problem. I remember when I worked in Michigan, it's a very interesting story. I was in Michigan for a few years. I worked for a doctor up there, an older doctor, and I learned a lot. And he had a nutrition practice, And his focus was on, believe it or not, eating disorders. He saw a lot of young men and young women who had eating disorders. And one of the things that he found helped the most for those people, in addition to a lot of the therapies that I've even discussed, like walking and exercise, was bone broth. And this was before, remember, I graduated in 2001. So this was before bone broth was a thing, right? Nobody knew about bone broth. But this doctor in Michigan, he was up in Holland, Michigan, he was giving these young adults bone broth as a prescription to drink. So he'd have these young girls coming into the clinic that had anxiety, major anxiety. A lot of them were also suffering from anorexia, and they'd been everywhere, nothing worked. And he would follow a lot of the same protocols that I'm mentioning to you. He would get them taking a Valerian complex, right? At that time, he didn't know about the human milk oligosaccharides and the gut connection, but he got them taking bone broth, and he would give them recipes to make their own bone broth, and he'd have these young adults drink like a big pint of bone broth with the fat from the bones and everything like at the top of it. They had to mix it in. He'd have them drink this stuff. And he had a really high rate of success. And it was because, of course, in that bone broth, they're getting all these amino acids that are so essential, right, for any type of building in the body, whether you're building hormones, whether you're building neurotransmitters, whether you're building muscle, healing tissue. You have to have these amino acids, and the bone broth was essential. Now today, we don't have to drink bone broth if we don't want. We can get collagen powder, which works okay. We can get bone broth powders. We can get protein powders, and there's a wide assortment of that you can find online. Certainly investigate it, find something you enjoy, something that tastes good, but definitely make sure that you're getting enough protein as well. How much protein? Well, there's a doctor online that I follow that I think very highly of. Her name is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, Lyon. She's a doctor who graduated from Washington University, and I graduated from university in St. Louis, Missouri, Washington University. I've been there many times studying for exams and stuff, a beautiful school. And so I have a bit of a connection there with that. She recommends making sure you try to get about 30 grams of protein per meal, which is a lot. But again, if you're not feeling good, you're willing to try anything, then try it. If you can't get that 30 grams of protein based on what you're eating, think about supplementing it with a protein shake or something like that, because it's really going to help. Finally, the last thing I really want to talk about is I want to go back to this idea of neurological integration and the idea of disintegration. Something that's fairly new, that's really only been on the market for a little while now, is hemp. And the idea of hemp oil as a supplementation. Now, before we go into this a bit deeper, I'm not talking about medical marijuana. I know that's helped a lot of people. That is not something that I'm a big proponent of. I have tried that myself. I've seen patients with that. I've seen the results of that. And on a personal level, I personally do not do well with THC, which is found in marijuana. And so that is not something that I recommend, although I know it has helped a lot of people. I've found in my own case that it just made me more anxious. We have receptors in our body that actually connect, right? They connect with these plants. So I thought, well, there must be something there because that's a natural process I need to investigate. And that's what I did. And what I found was that we can get the benefits of activating this endocannabinoid system without the THC, right? Which is the element of marijuana that will make you high, which I find really adds to anxiety. We can get the same benefits by taking about 15 milligrams of these phytocannabinoids, and they're found in hemp oil. And so I'd really recommend, if you're taking the Valerian complex, you're taking the GI stability, you're walking, you're taking your protein, you're on the way to getting healthy, you're on the way to mastering your anxiety, I'd also take a long look at hemp oil. Standard Process makes a great organic hemp oil. They grow it on their own farm in Wisconsin. It's a wonderful product. It will not make you feel dopey. It won't make you feel high. You're not going to get a buzz on it, so to speak. But you start taking this, you take a dropper of it, which is about 15 milligrams of this phytocannabinoid element. Take about a dropper of it under the tongue. Let it sit under the tongue for a while and then swallow it. They put it in a mixture of organic olive oil. And what you're going to find is that after a little while of taking this, everything is just going to start to communicate better. Everything's going to work better, right? And that's how I always explain it to people. I always explain it like, even if you're taking other supplements and other types of plant medicine, once you balance your endocannabinoid system, everything just communicates better and everything starts working better. All of a sudden, the Valerian starts to work more efficiently because of that system being able to communicate properly. And that's what the hemp oil does. So I'd strongly recommend that you look into that as well, especially if you're suffering. For some people, if they are having severe anxiety to the point where they're almost suicidal, this is a different category, right? We have to immediately go into emergency mode if we're in that. We have to preserve life. We have to be more cautious. We don't have the time to wait. And so in those cases, pharmaceutical intervention sometimes is definitely warranted and something that you need to consider. We always have to weigh out the good and the bad. In a lot of those cases where people are really hurting, sometimes, and they can't sleep, for example, they're just, all night long, they're up, they're wired. In those cases, if the Valerian complex and the hemp oil together are not enough to get that person to relax, then I usually will also recommend Kava. And Kava Forte is a great product if I need to basically sedate that patient. If they're not sleeping, that's normally my criteria. If you're not sleeping properly, even though you've been taking the Valerian complex and the hemp oil for a while, like maybe a couple of days, and it doesn't seem to be having the effect, then I'll bring in the big gun. I'll have them get a bottle of Kava Forte. And the Kava Forte is a medicine that is going to basically, I don't know how to say it, but it's like it's going to knock you out. It's going to put you to sleep. I'll have a patient take one, wait like 10 minutes, and if they're not asleep, take a second one, wait 10 minutes, take a third one, wait 10 minutes, take a fourth one. I don't know anybody that has had to take more than 3. Usually for me, 2 does the job. But again, that's another nice tool to have in the toolbox. If we're having trouble with sleep, you definitely don't want to take Kava Forte. If you're working, if you're driving a car, it will knock you out. So keep that in mind. Once you resolve your anxiety through this protocol and you have it under control, then and only then, the next step is to try and find out some of these underlying mechanisms that may be in place. I always recommend people take a look at their spine to make sure that they don't have disc problems in their neck and their lower back, because those things can irritate the nervous system. And there's other videos on that and other protocols you can follow. And finally, I always like to recommend that they look to the liver. The liver is a big filter. All of our blood goes through the liver where it is filtered. So if there's any junk in our blood, it ends up in the liver. And that poor liver, a lot of times it needs to be cleaned. It needs some relief. And so addressing the spine and the liver would be secondary once we achieve success with the initial anxiety protocol. Look, thank you very much for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions. You can reach out to me. All the contact information is on my website, drstephenstokes.com. I encourage you to download a copy of my book, Heal Yourself, if you'd like to learn more about these protocols. That book, by the way, is just filled with protocols. I mean, that's what it is. It's like a big cookbook of protocols. And so I think you're going to really enjoy that book as a reference if this is something that you're interested in. If you're interested in health and longevity, please subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, And remember, if you're interested in any of the products that I've mentioned, you can now buy those directly from Standard Process with link on my website without even opening an account. You can get them directly from Standard Process. You don't pay any extra money for that. And in using the link, you support me and support this channel. And that allows me to make these videos and offer the consultations, the systems survey, and copies of my book, all at no charge. Thank you very much.